Hi, I'm Carla. My own brother, a cop, pulled me over, shoved a gun in my face, and sneered, "You think your badge makes you special?" He didn't know I run the FBI. When his captain rushed up and saw me cuffed, he stuttered, then saluted. That moment changed everything. But what came after was worse than the gun, worse than the betrayal. Before we start, tell me, where are you listening from, and what would you do if the person aiming the weapon shared your blood? 1C. Snowflakes the size of quarters drifted across the highway, dulling the world to ash-gray silence. My wipers ticked back and forth, steady as my pulse, while the bureau radio hissed inside the cup holder. Dispatch wanted confirmation that I was in position to intercept a shipment of stolen rifles, but I pressed mute. The voice I kept hearing wasn't a dispatcher. It was my mother, 2 weeks earlier at Dad's funeral, whispering, "Sit in the back, Carla. The family needs space." Family. That word clanged harder than any handcuff, even now, even after 39 winters of being reminded I was the spare wheel the Torres clan never asked for. I'd flown in from D.C., paid for the headstone, and still ended up at a folding chair behind the flower arrangements, while my older brother, Officer Michael Torres, local hero of Jackson County, took center podium and spoke as if Dad had only one child. When the service ended, Mom hugged him, then brushed right past me with a frozen smile. "Thank you for coming," like I was a distant cousin. A semi rolled by, its horn shaking me back to the present. Mile marker 241. 5 more exits and I'd pick up the dirt road to the silo where our informant said the rifles were boxed. My government SUV blended into traffic. No lights, no siren. I preferred it that way. Quiet work suited me. Yet, the longer I steered through that powdered dusk, the louder my father's voice played in my head. "Mikey keeps us safe on these roads. Federal folks just collect paychecks." I tightened my grip on the wheel, fighting the ping of resentment. Dad was in the ground. His opinion shouldn't matter. But grief isn't polite. It shows up unbuckled and messy the moment you think you've got everything lined up. Red and blue strobes exploded in my rearview mirror. My first thought, support unit? The KCPD liaison sometimes tailed bureau cars to a drop. I signaled, pulled to the shoulder. Crunching snow stopped under my tires. I cracked the window and waited, badge ready. Boots stomped toward me, heavy, determined, my nostrils filled with diesel and cold. Then I recognized the gait, the faint limp he earned chasing a shoplifter back in '09. Michael. The driver's side door flung open. No greeting, no "Hey, kid." Just a bark. "Step out of the vehicle." "Mike, it's freezing." "Out, now." He didn't use my name. He didn't need to. I climbed out, lifting my hands shoulder high so any dashcam caught the courtesy. My bureau credential rested against my coat, but his gaze never dropped. "You think that little gold shield makes you special?" His breath steamed, eyes hard as the icicles hanging from the guardrail. "I'm on a federal op," I answered measured. "Radio my SAC if you doubt it." He shoved me against the hood, metal biting through my sleeves. Cold bracelets clicked shut. A minivan slowed, a teenager's phone angled through the passenger window. Somewhere a trucker hit an air horn. The highway suddenly felt like a stage. "Michael, is this who you really are now?" My voice didn't crack. It cut, quiet, surgical. He didn't answer. His jaw flexed, the same motion he made chewing sunflower seeds during Little League. He marched me to his cruiser, opened the rear door. Snow spiraled around us like confetti at the wrong celebration. A black Suburban skidded in, fishtailing before stopping inches from Michael's bumper. A tall man in a bureau windbreaker jumped out, fury burning behind wire rim glasses. "Officer, remove those cuffs." Michael hesitated. "She claimed bureau status, no proof." "She's not just bureau." The man's voice dropped to gravel. "She's my director." He pivoted toward me, then, to my shock, saluted. Traffic noise died in my ears, replaced by Michael fumbling with the key, metal scraping metal. Snow stung my cheeks. I stared at him, nothing left to say. Inside his eyes I saw it, the flicker of recognition sliding into something uglier. Click. The cuffs popped. They landed in his mittened hand, suddenly heavier than lead. I didn't rub my wrists. I didn't breathe a curse. I simply stepped back, straightened, and waited for the windbreaker to open the Suburban's passenger door. Michael tried to speak, but the words jammed in his throat. I held his stare a moment longer, letting the silence do what speeches never could. Then I turned, boots crunching, and walked toward the warm cabin light of the SUV, leaving twin circles of steel gleaming in the roadside slush. And I climbed into the back seat of the Bureau SUV without a backward glance. The cuffs Michael had fumbled now lay abandoned in brown slush, a souvenir for highway cleanup. Inside the vehicle, the heater pushed warm air that smelled faintly of stale coffee. The junior agent behind the wheel, Harris if I recalled, kept darting glances at me in the rearview mirror. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as he merged onto I-70. Silence wrapped the cabin. Not an awkward hush, an intentional ceasefire. I could feel Harris sweating over what to say, so I spared him. "Do you have a tissue?" My voice came out, even, almost bored. He fumbled in the center console, handed one back. I dabbed the red line circling my wrist. The skin was already bruising a soft wine color. "I'm sorry, Director," he blurted. "None of us knew—" "Focus on the mission," I interrupted, folding the tissue neatly. "The rifles are still in play." "Yes, ma'am." His shoulders dropped half an inch, relief mixed with fear. The rest of the ride we spoke only in radio codes and exit numbers. We rolled into the secure garage beneath the Kansas City field office just shy of 10 a.m. Fluorescent lights washed the Suburban in a sickly glow. I stepped out, still wearing the civilian coat Michael had wrinkled. My badge hung at my chest, dull brass against black wool. The elevator ride up smelled of disinfectant and nerves. When the doors slid open to the third-floor corridor, conversation dimmed the way streetlights flick off at dawn. Analysts in polo shirts straightened. A janitor paused mid-mop. Someone whispered, "That's her." Another answered, "The one from the video?" I kept walking. Left, right, left. Military cadence learned years earlier when no one believed I could finish Quantico. My boots thudded across the tile like a metronome. The Situation Room buzzed with screens, maps, and the jitter of caffeine. 20 staffers spun in their chairs as I entered. A logistics officer half rose, uncertain whether to stand or salute. I saved him the decision. "Seats, everyone!" My tone cut through the room. "We've lost 12 hours thanks to unexpected local interference. The arms convoy is now confirmed for 1,400 hours at the Wendell County silo. New intel?" A young tech raised her hand, voice shaky. Thermal drone picked up 3 bodies, 1 vehicle, minimal heat signatures, probable cold storage crates. "Good, we move fast and quiet," I said, clicking through the satellite overlay. "I want 2 perimeter units, drone eyes high, and a clean chain of custody." Questions flew. I fielded them like batting practice. By the time the wall clock hit 10:27, the plan was locked, contingencies noted, coffee gone cold. People lingered, stealing looks at the faint bruise on my wrist. I ignored them, turned to leave, and nearly collided with Senior Agent Ross Kimmel. Salt and pepper hair, loyalty older than my director's parking spot. He cleared his throat. "Director, a word?" I tilted my head toward the hallway. The glass panels muted the briefing room din. He pulled out his phone, thumb trembling. "Ma'am, a dashcam clip from this morning is already on a watchdog site. It'll go national by noon." He exhaled. "And there's more. We intercepted a leak report last week, IP traced to the precinct system. The access log belongs to your brother." For half a heartbeat, I felt that handcuff bite again. Then the sensation passed. "How long have you been sitting on this?" "I got confirmation 30 minutes ago." "Show me the metadata." He handed over a printed sheet. Michael's badge number, timestamps, the same equipment ID that approved 2 forged search warrants last year. I folded the paper once, sliding it into my coat. "We proceed with the operation. No deviations." "Director, with respect, Kimmel, I can't recuse myself because someone in my bloodline lacks integrity." I steadied my breathing. "But thank you for bringing this to me first." As he walked off, a memory flickered. Senior year, chemistry lab, beaker shattered by my elbow. I'd watched glass scatter like stars. Michael stepped in, told the teacher it was his fault. The detention went on his record, not mine. He'd protected me then. Funny how protection curdles into control. I headed downstairs to the armory. Fluorescent hum, cardstock smell of ammunition logs. I signed out a Kevlar vest and placed my name beside the operation code. The quartermaster stared at my bruised wrist but said nothing. Vest strapped, headset checked, I paused at the door. A faint buzz vibrated in my chest pocket. Phone alert. The clip of my arrest had already reached 40,000 views. Comment section erupting in theories, praise, slurs. I powered the screen dark. In the mirror behind the weapons cage, I caught my reflection. Hair disheveled, eyes sharp, coat still wrinkled from Michael's grip. I smoothed a lapel, not for vanity but to feel the steady beat beneath. Command weighs more than any cuff. I could carry it. The instant I released the mic button, the cabin filled with the steady thunk-thunk of the tires. No siren, no escort, just prairie wind humming through door seams. Harris glanced back once, but I'd already dropped the visor and started running the arrival checklist out loud. Speaking the sequence steadied my pulse. Logistics channels green, body cam rolling, warrants uploaded, drone feed live. By the time we left the interstate for a gravel road, the bureau van with the perimeter team was a mile behind us, exactly where I'd ordered it to stay. Sunlight bounced off acres of dry wheat stubble. The abandoned grain silo rose ahead, rust-striped and listing, as if Kansas itself had exhaled and forgotten it. I popped my door before the SUV stopped moving, boots landing in dust the color of cinnamon. 40 yards out, I keyed the throat mic. Command. Visual confirmed. Proceeding. No tremor in my voice. Adrenaline kept the syllables crisp. The air near the silo tasted metallic. I pulled my sidearm, edged along the shadow of a cracked concrete hopper, and slipped through a gap in the corrugated wall. Inside, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Shafts of light cut through bullet holes, painting stripes across wooden pallets stamped with Cyrillic codes. One man in a ski mask counted bundles of bills on a crate. Another stood by a portable radio, humming. I didn't give them time to process a female silhouette. Federal agents, hands where I can see them. My words echoed off metal walls. The counter clicked to the floor. The first smuggler froze. The second reached for something. Bad choice. I delivered a hard command and a harder tackle, cuffing him while the perimeter team stormed in behind me. The takedown felt textbook, almost too smooth. That's when I noticed the burner phone. It lay on an oil drum, screen still glowing, recent call time stamped 4 minutes earlier. Warm device, recent conversation. Against procedure, I tapped playback. A voicemail crackled. Tell them to move it 30 minutes early. She won't be there yet. Make sure no witnesses. Michael's voice, casual, assured, unmistakable. My stomach tightened like someone had cinched a belt. I slipped the phone into an evidence pouch, sealed it, forced my lungs to keep their rhythm. No time to bleed in front of subordinates. A shot rang outside, not at us, warning fire, sloppy and high. I bolted through the jagged opening, dust exploding beneath my boots. A runner in camo bolted toward a tree line. I sprinted, closing ground on adrenaline and anger. He veered, stumbled. I launched, driving him into prairie grass. Soil and chaff filled my mouth. "Who told you to move the drop?" I hissed, pinning his wrists. He spat blood, eyes wide. "Ask your brother. He said you wouldn't pull the trigger." For one heartbeat, my finger hovered above the safety. The prairie fell silent except for both our breaths. I cuffed him instead, muscles shaking, not from strain, but rage too old to name. By 1500 hours, the silo was sealed, suspects loaded, rifles inventoried. Back at the field office, fluorescent light washed over congratulatory smiles. I stood at the debrief table, voice even as I listed chain of custody numbers. No one asked why I never mentioned the burner phone. I logged it under an anonymous evidence tag, my initials nowhere near the entry. Paper shields were safer than family. When the chatter died, I slipped into the locker room. Metal benches, chlorine scent from the shower drain, echo of distant phones. I sat, elbows on knees, hands finally free to tremble. The voicemail replayed in my head. Michael arranging to sabotage a federal op, confident I would be late, confident I wouldn't shoot. Years ago, he'd stolen my detention slip so I could play clarinet in the winter concert. Now he was stealing my credibility. A memory burst, uninvited, last Christmas before Dad got sick. Michael balanced 2 plates at the buffet, sliding the bigger slice of pecan pie onto mine. "Fuel up, little sis. Quantico's not feeding you enough." Pride in his grin, warmth in his elbow bump. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who traded oaths for shortcuts. The locker room clock clicked. Operation reports demanded signatures, not sentiment. I stood, smoothed my vest, and tucked the evidence pouch deeper into my go bag. Officially, I'd done my duty. Privately, something cracked. Betrayal wasn't abstract. It was a voice message, a whispered dare, a reminder that blood can clot into stone. I held the burner phone between 2 fingers, studying its cracked screen as if it might confess more than Michael's voice. Confronting him would feel good, briefly, but satisfaction isn't strategy. So I chased a different kind of justice, the kind that ripens slowly in sealed envelopes and evidence lockers. I dialed internal affairs from my hotel room, the shower still fogging the mirror. "Anonymous tip," I began, tone flat. "Level 3 conflict, Officer Michael Torres, audio proof attached." The supervisor tried to pull me into dialogue. Protocol this, sworn statement that, but I offered no story, just the data file. When the call ended, the only sound in the room was the soft click of the air vent. 1 domino down. The second number sat in my contacts under a name I'd never deleted, Colonel Hayden Cole, though he hadn't worn the rank since leaving the Corps for the Bureau. I stared at the screen long enough for it to dim, then I tapped call before I could indulge regret. "Carla." His voice, after 7 silent years, sounded older, smoky. "Thought you were stationed on Mount Olympus these days." "It's urgent," I said. "Memorial Park. Noon tomorrow." A stretch of silence, then a sigh I recognized as reluctant consent. "Same bench?" "Same bench." 2 mornings later, I was back in Washington, the Potomac glinting under a pale sky. Internal Affairs took my packet without so much as a handshake. Bureau corridors always smell like carpet glue and ambition. I escaped them as fast as possible. Arlington's rolling greens swallowed traffic noise, leaving only wind and the muted thump of my boots. The marble bench sat beneath an oak, exactly where we'd eaten turkey sandwiches during training lectures, long before Fallujah changed every conversation between us. Hayden arrived precisely at noon, uniform-cut suit, hair threaded with silver. He studied the bruise on my wrist, but greeted me with the ghost of a smile. "You look tired," he said. His eyes flashed concern, not pity. "Sleeps for people without family crises." I handed him a flash drive. "Voice match is 89%. I need your lab to push it to 100, off book." He sat, turning the metal stick in his palm. "Why now?" "Because corrosion spreads. If I don't scrape it out, the whole structure collapses, and I go with it." We watched a funeral detail march by, rifles on shoulders. When the flag folded, Hayden cleared his throat. "Before I run your file, you should know this. They're running one on you." I stayed still. Define they. Office of Professional Responsibility. Someone filed a complaint 6 weeks ago, claims you forged a federal order. My pulse thudded. Filed by? Detective Cassandra Vale. He exhaled my name like a warning. Your brother's former girlfriend. I leaned back, feeling the bench's cold bite. Cassandra. Freckles. Photographic memory, able to charm a room and hollow it out moments later. She'd once sent me a Christmas card praising women in blue, yet here she was painting a target on my badge. I've pulled timelines, phone pings, email headers. Hayden slid a manila folder between us. Inside, printouts, headshots, a spiderweb of dates. Michael swapped duty shifts the night Cassandra's complaint was stamped. 2 days later, my orders to surveil the gun-running ring were rerouted to a dead inbox. Even my encrypted messages had been bounced through his precinct server. a braid of sabotage, tight and deliberate. "This goes beyond sibling rivalry," Hayden said. "Somebody wants you discredited before a bigger bust hits daylight." I closed the folder, feeling a weight settle across my ribs. "Thank you for not shutting the door." "I never shut it, Carla." The faintest edge of hurt slid under his words. "You walked away." I met his gaze. Years ago, I'd left him on a tarmac in Kuwait, orders in hand, fear in my throat. Now here we were, surrounded by silent white headstones, neither of us certain which war we were fighting. "Help me," I said, voice low, not because we used to share Sunday papers, but because this bureau still means something to both of us. He gave a single nod, the one I remembered from briefings. Mission accepted. We parted near the gate. The city buzzed beyond the cemetery wall, but the graves kept their counsel. I hailed a cab, opened the folder again during the ride, and committed every date and name to memory. Cassandra Vale had underestimated how long I could hold a grudge without letting it poison my judgment. At headquarters, I signed out body armor for the next morning's precinct visit. The armory clerk noticed my bruised wrist had deepened to plum and offered an ice pack. I declined. Pain, handled properly, clarifies priorities. That night, I lay in a borrowed Georgetown apartment, evidence charts sprawled across the dining table. Each arrow pointed back to Michael, but Cassandra's fingerprints gleamed on the edges. Sleep hovered but never landed. At dawn, I folded the charts into my briefcase and buttoned a crisp blouse. Wrinkles invite doubt. Morning unspooled in a haze of stale coffee and highway mile markers. I parked outside the Fairfax County precinct at 8:03, the sky the color of an unspoken apology. My bureau blazer was pressed sharp enough to slice whispers. I'd need every edge. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered over linoleum, the shade of disappointment. Conversations fizzled as I walked the corridor. No one saluted, but chairs straightened, and the rustle of gossip folded into nervous paper cranes. Michael lounged at the watch desk, boots crossed, hands laced behind his head, the posture of a man convinced the room belonged to him. Our eyes met. He lifted one eyebrow, a silent dare. 2 minutes later, the door behind me hissed open, bringing a whiff of perfume and copier toner. Detective Cassandra Vale glided in, clipboard pressed to her chest like a hymn book. Her smile was pure confection, the aftertaste promised cavities. "Director Torres," she trilled, adding just enough volume for nearby officers to overhear. "The Bureau rarely graces us with an administrative spot check, especially someone with your complicated resume." I returned the smile, thinner, colder. "Exactly why I'm here, Detective. Complications need daylight." My pulse spiked, but I let the adrenaline sharpen my diction. Michael's smirk widened. He recognized the bait, knew Cassandra's sugar-hid hooks. We gathered in a narrow conference cubicle that smelled of dry erase fumes. A half-circle of sergeants settled in, pretending casual interest. I spoke for 10 minutes. Audit scope, evidence chain, the importance of transparent policing. Cassandra interrupted twice to clarify procedure, each time lacing her questions with the suggestion I might be overstepping. I answered without blinking, but the sting landed. Every officer in the room watched us like a tennis match. While a corporal booted the precinct database, I noticed Michael's ceramic coffee mug perched on the ledge behind him. A crescent-shaped chip marred the handle, identical to the mug captured in a photo off yesterday's burner phone. The detail hit like a thumb to the sternum. He wasn't a distant accessory. He was elbow deep. I logged the observation, expression neutral. "Before we move on," I said, sliding a thick logbook across the table, "I need the duty officer's signature verifying patrol mileage." Routine request. On paper. Michael reached lazily for a pen, scratched his name, flipped the book back with practiced indifference. Ink still wet, I closed it, trapping the flourish like an insect in amber. My heartbeat drummed a victory cadence only I could hear. Because last night I'd printed a falsified wiretap request, one submitted to the county clerk 3 months ago. Same font, same margin notes, and now, thanks to Michael's carelessness, the exact same signature and ink pattern. Proof that forged paperwork flowed from this chair to the smuggler's pockets. One more brick for the indictment wall. The meeting adjourned amid polite coughs. Cassandra offered a handshake I pretended not to see. In the lobby, Michael whispered, "Still chasing ghosts, baby sister?" His tone dripped affection seasoned with threat. I let silence answer. It bruises deeper than words. Outside, cold sunlight bounced off cruiser windshields. A gray sedan idled half a block down, Hayden's temporary assignment car. I adjusted my messenger bag, raising 2 fingers, then 4, palm facing him. 4 hours, pull traffic cam footage. Hayden dipped his chin once, started the engine. If Cassandra met Michael before the briefing, camera timestamps would stitch them together tighter than any rumor. I slid into my own vehicle, shut the door, and finally exhaled. The logbook lay on the passenger seat, Michael's signature glowing like radioactive ink. I thought of the chip in his mug, the carelessness that creeps into people who believe their last name is armor. Neither of them realized the audit wasn't paperwork, it was a tripwire. I pulled away from the curb, the bureau radio muttering static. The plan had moved another square forward, but victory tasted like penny metal on my tongue. Family warps every triumph. The win always costs full price. We didn't speak much during the drive to the Reston facility. Just the quiet hum of tires on damp pavement and the occasional flick of Hayden's blinker. The weight of the morning still hung over me like fog. Michael's fake smile, Cassandra's sugar-coated venom, and that mug. That chipped mug. My gut said it wasn't just coincidence, and I've learned, never ignore your gut. When we pulled into the gated compound, Hayden keyed in the access code and gave me a look. Not a question, not sympathy, just quiet solidarity. That's all I needed. The surveillance lab was dim, just the blue glow of multiple screens and the hum of the server fans in the corner. I settled into the chair next to him, folded my hands, and let him cue the footage. Station lot, camera 3, timestamp, yesterday 5:30 to 6:00 a.m., he murmured. The grainy video played at triple speed, early delivery vans, a few officers arriving early. Then, at 5:47, a familiar SUV nosed into the lot. Hayden slowed the playback. Michael stepped out first, unbothered. He circled to the passenger side. The door opened. Cassandra. She smoothed down her hair, glanced at the building, then leaned forward and kissed him on the cheek. My fingers curled into my palms. Then she handed him something, a manila folder. Not just any folder. I leaned forward. Hayden froze the frame. There it was, clear as day. The faded blue bureau emblem, worn but distinct, with the outdated pre-2010 classification banner. I stared at it, heart slowing. "That's mine," I said quietly. "That folder, I locked that in Archive C 6 weeks ago. Top shelf. Sealed." Hayden didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Cassandra had access, but not that level of clearance. Unless someone handed her the master code, unless someone wanted her to have it, unless someone, Michael, had planned this with her from the start. "This isn't just personal," I whispered. "They're using bureau files. That's a federal breach." "They knew you'd trace it," Hayden said, "and they didn't care." He reached across me, pulled open a secondary folder on the desk. "There's something else." My stomach tensed before my fingers even touched the paper. The document inside wasn't familiar, but the name at the top was. Subject: Michael Aldridge requested by Cassandra Vega target comparison, Franklin Aldridge. I scanned the rest. DNA verification, full genomic analysis, cross-referenced with multiple blood markers. Result: no biological relation. I didn't blink. Couldn't. My voice, when it came, was hoarse. "He's not my brother?" Hayden said nothing, just watched me, not out of pity, out of preparation. Michael wasn't my brother. Not by blood. Not by any strand of DNA. The man who spent years mocking me, blocking my transfers, undermining my work, whispering poison into every room I entered. He wasn't even family. But he knew. He always knew. I was the one in the dark. Suddenly, the memory hit like a hammer to the chest. I was 14. I had just won second place in the Regional Federal History Bowl. My mother had poured me a glass of lemonade and said, You're too smart for your own good. Not like your brother." Her tone wasn't proud. It was cold, resigned. I thought it was exhaustion. Now, it felt like shame. Had I been a reminder of something she wanted to forget? A mistake? An affair? Had Michael always resented me not because of my ambition, but because I stood as proof that he wasn't the chosen one? I closed the folder slowly, took a long breath, let it fill every corner of my lungs. It was never about the bureau. It was never about rank, I murmured. He hated me because I existed, because I ruined his story. Hayden reached for the room's light panel, hesitated. "So, what now?" I looked at him. Really looked. My voice was steady again. "Now, we stop whispering. We go louder." He nodded once. "Then we go all the way." I stood, gathered the evidence, the traffic footage, the DNA results, that stolen file. There were still questions I didn't have answers for, but one thing was clear. If blood didn't make us family, then betrayal certainly did, and someone still owed me the truth about why. The air felt damp with memories as I stepped out of the car. Dew still clung to the hedges, and the sun hung lazily in the sky, already warming the worn siding of my childhood home. I stood at the edge of the driveway for a long moment, not quite ready to face what waited inside. Nothing had changed. The same chipped flower pot sat beneath the windowsill, cradling what I assumed were still artificial geraniums. The wooden eagle my father carved in 1983 still loomed on the front door, its beak cracked from when Michael slammed it shut during one of his tantrums. I opened the door and stepped into stillness. The living room greeted me with the usual smell: lemon-scented cleaner mixed with old carpet and faint traces of bacon. The crocheted doily still clung to the coffee table like it had been glued there. The wooden spoon rack hung proudly over the stove, and the floor creaked under my steps in the exact same places it always had. Only today, none of it felt comforting. It felt like walking through a set built for someone else's life. From the kitchen, I heard her humming, soft and familiar. It was that old gospel tune she always played when she was trying to forgive something. I couldn't remember the lyrics, only the melody, slow, almost mournful. I walked in. Mom stood at the counter in her morning housecoat, rinsing a dish under lukewarm water. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtain, casting fractured shadows across her silver hair. She hadn't heard me yet. I didn't clear my throat. I just said, "Mom." The humming stopped. She turned slowly, dish towel in hand, face unreadable, but not surprised. Her eyes scanned me the way a mother scans her child after a long absence, not for love, but for damage. "You're early," she said, voice steady. I didn't answer that. Instead, I stepped closer and sat down at the small kitchen table, the same table where she used to slice oranges and quiz me on state capitals. "Who is my father?" Her hand froze on the dish. The towel slipped to the floor. For a second, I thought she hadn't heard me. Then she turned back toward the sink. Her shoulders sagged as though someone had placed bricks on them. "Why would you ask that now?" I didn't move. "Because I know Michael isn't my brother. Because there's a report, DNA. Because I found a folder in evidence that was stolen from me. And it had your handwriting on it." She slowly sat down across from me, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped the edge of the table. "I never wanted you to know," she whispered. "I thought if I kept it quiet long enough, it would fade." "Fade into what?" I asked. "Into a lie I was supposed to call family?" "I did what I had to." Her voice cracked. "It was a hard time. I was alone. Your father, he wasn't someone I could build a life with. He was temporary." My chest tightened. "Then who was he?" She looked away. "He worked contracts for the Bureau, Black Ops. I never even knew his real name, but he left long before you were born." "And Michael?" I asked. She shut her eyes. "He always sensed you were different. He was jealous. So I told him you were adopted, from a cousin upstate. I thought it would protect you." "No," I said quietly. "It protected the secret, not me." Her lips quivered. "I'm sorry, Carla. I was trying to keep things together." You were so bright, so strong. I didn't want that light dimmed by shame. Shame. That was it. That was the root of all this. The hushed tone when I got awards, the way she looked away when I brought home certificates, commendations. That wasn't pride, that was guilt. I stood up slowly. The kitchen felt smaller now, like the walls were leaning in. I didn't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. I turned toward the pantry, not really sure why. Maybe to get air, maybe to find a reason to stay grounded. I stepped inside and leaned against the shelf. My fingers brushed against a rice bag that had probably been there since Clinton was in office. Something fell behind it. A yellowing envelope. I picked it up. It was small, sealed, and addressed in neat, cramped handwriting. Carla, for when it's time. My heart thumped. I peeled the flap open. Inside was a single sheet of stationery. The ink had faded in places, but the words were still clear. It was dated 12 years ago, signed only as JD, but I didn't need the full name. The words were simple, honest. Carla, if you're reading this, it means Diane finally let the truth surface. I was never meant to stay. That's not an excuse, it's the truth. But I've watched from a distance. You've become everything I hoped you'd be. You fight for the right things. You protect the innocent. Blood doesn't define your worth. Purpose does. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I stared at the letter for a long time, feeling each line carve itself into a part of me I didn't know still needed carving. When I walked back into the kitchen, Mom was standing by the sink again, clutching the same dish. Her shoulders were shaking now, not from anger, but from something deeper. She didn't say anything, just stood there, small and old and silent. I walked to the front door. "Carla!" she called behind me, voice breaking. "Please!" I paused, hand on the knob. I deserved the truth a long time ago, and I stepped out. The wind had picked up. It smelled like wet leaves and soap. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My feet carried me to the car. I sat down, gripped the steering wheel, and just breathed. There was no dramatic music, no cinematic fade-out, just silence, and a letter on the passenger seat reminding me I was never anyone's mistake, just someone's secret. I wasn't looking for revenge. What I wanted, needed, was clarity. So, 2 nights after confronting my mother, I bypassed the comfortable rituals of bedtime and drove straight to the Bureau's Washington field office. The parking garage was nearly empty, late-shift analysts already nursing energy drinks behind tinted windows. I swiped my badge, placed my thumb on the reader, leaned into the retinal scan. Each click acknowledged who I was and reminded me how quickly labels can lose meaning. The server room stood at the end of a silent hallway. Fluorescent panels hummed overhead, the only witnesses to whatever lines I was about to cross. Inside, racks of cooled steel blinked green and amber, like a constellation answering only to policy. I logged in under Director Privilege, one of 3 people allowed to touch the classified family records archive. A prompt asked for a DNA trace key. I typed the initials from the letter, JD, added the string of numbers scrawled in the margin, searching, or the progress wheel spun long enough for my conscience to whisper, "You could stop here." I ignored it. A single result populated. Project Cypress, restricted, sealed. My pulse thumped in my ears as I broke the seal. The first page showed a faded photograph of a younger version of the man who wrote me, camouflage fatigues, eyes sharp. Beside it, a summary, covert informant embedded in Rural Law Enforcement Corruption Task Force 1995-2007. Scroll, excerpt 2006. Subject reports systemic falsification of arrest logs, evidence laundering by Sheriff's Office, Orange County, VA, potential links to white supremacist donor network. Then, the entry that iced my lungs. March 12, 2007. Officer Michael Ruiz, badge 49-17, flagged for intimidation and racial profiling. Recommended internal investigation closed after local interference. Ruiz. Michael's birth surname before Mom married again. I braced against the desk. The boy who once stole detention slips had grown into an officer shrouded by buried complaints, and someone powerful had helped bury them. I drilled deeper. Disciplinary files marked scrubbed, traffic stop harassment, missing body cam footage, excessive force on a teenage driver. Each complaint died before an IA review. Diane's name appeared once, as a witness who declined to testify. I was 17 then, packing for Quantico summer prep, believing my future was miles from this rot. Turns out the rot traveled. But the next file sliced sharper than any betrayal. One record half redacted, tagged sensitive, minor. I overrode the lock, heart steady now. A statement appeared, dated October 22, 2003, filed by a 17-year-old girl. Officer Ruiz had pulled her over, mocked her ID photo, threatened to call ICE on her mother, then let her drive off shaking. Complainant initials, KR. My breath caught. I couldn't recall the incident, not fully, a smear in memory, flashing lights, a cold lecture about knowing my place, me gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I'd gone home, eyes burning, and written everything down on notebook paper. Apparently, I'd mailed it. Apparently, it never mattered. Until now. The cursor blinked, waiting for input. My hands hovered over the keyboard, steady as stone. I opened a new document, formal, uncompromising. Subject, patterned misconduct. Officer Michael Ruiz, Torres, paragraph after paragraph flowed. Dates, evidence tags, audio IDs, the traffic lot video, the stolen archive folder, chain custody. When that report was done, I drafted two more. One for the Attorney General's Public Integrity section, the other for the Bureau's Office of Professional Responsibility. No emotion, no hyperbole, just a timeline sharpened to a blade. I saved each file to an encrypted drive, slipped it into an evidence envelope, and sealed it with tamper tape. My reflection in the monitor looked older, edges harder, but the eyes were calm. I used to believe truth spoke for itself. Now I understood it needs a sworn statement and the right routing code. As I powered down, a memory surfaced unbidden. Michael teasing me after my first day at the academy, "Don't forget where you came from." Funny how he never worried about where he came from. I flicked off the server room light, stepped into the corridor, and locked the door behind me. The concrete smelled of cold dust and promises kept too late. Under the exit sign's red glow, I whispered into the quiet, "I will not let this happen again." Tomorrow, papers would land on desks that preferred tidy narratives. Tomorrow, silence would end. The hearing was set, and rumor said every seat had been claimed by dawn. I arrived through the service corridor, no entourage, no press line, just the soft tap of my shoes echoing off marble. The committee chamber felt colder than the February air outside, microphones glinting beneath white lights, rows of uniforms and suits packed shoulder to shoulder. 3 chairs down, Michael kept his gaze glued to the ceiling vent, jaw working like he chewed on nails. Cassandra's seat bore a folded card marked "on leave." Her absence rang louder than any gavel. I waited while minor witnesses testified, policy analysts, an ethics professor, 2 citizens describing roadside fear. Finally, the clerk called my name. Cameras flashed. I placed my notes on the walnut desk and met each panelist's eyes before speaking. "My name is Carla M. Torres. I serve as director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." No tremor, no apology. "I'm here today because unchecked authority erodes public trust, and because the badge on my jacket should never outrank the truth." I outlined the timeline, a routine night drive turned hostile, my brother's gun at my face, forged wire requests carrying his signature, Cassandra's theft of sealed evidence. I described the hidden traffic lot rendezvous, the decades-old complaints that vanished like smoke, my own forgotten teenage report resurfacing in redacted ink. Every sentence landed clean, clipped, each pause designed to let the words sink rather than sting. When I finished, I folded my pages and added one final line. "Power is a loan, not a birthright. I will spend the rest of my tenure collecting interest for the people it belongs to." Silence, thick as drizzle. Then Michael exploded. He leapt up, chair skidding. "You think you're so pure? You're nothing without that bureau patch." Veins bulged at his neck. Grandstanding in front of strangers. Security stepped forward, but I lifted a hand. "Mr. Chairman," I said evenly, "Exhibit 38B is now relevant." A tech tapped a key. The wall monitor flickered to life, showing body cam footage. Michael cornering a probationary deputy last spring, voice low, menace blatant. Gasps rippled through the audience. The committee chair's gavel struck once, twice. Michael's shoulders deflated as if someone had opened a valve. The ruling came swiftly, suspension without pay pending criminal indictment. Cassandra's attorney submitted her resignation via email before the lunch break. Reporters surged, flashing bulbs like summer lightning, but I offered no headline. My silence sufficed. Outside, winter sun bounced off courthouse stone. Hayden fell into step at my left, Agent Lind at my right. Microphones floated, questions ricocheted, yet we walked through them untouched. 3 silhouettes against glaring light. No victory lap, just clear air and the sense that a door had finally closed. Weeks later, a padded envelope arrived at my office. No return address, only my name in teenage handwriting. Inside lay a letter I'd penned at 17. The night Officer Ruiz humiliated me on Route 29. I had poured anger onto lined paper, sealed it, and apparently never mailed it. Mom must have tucked it among her keepsakes before guilt turned to dust. One line read, "Don't let him take your fire." I struck a match, watched the flame crawl across that fragile past, and let the embers fall into a porcelain dish. Not out of bitterness, but release. Some stories end better as ash than as evidence. They tried to silence me, first with shame, then with a badge, and finally with fear. But what they